Hello and welcome to today's edition of Daf Yomi, Bekhorot Daf 23 Omid B. So let's dive straight in. So just to finish off the previous Omid Daf, but according to Rabbi Yochanan it says, both this one and that one are items of both forms of impurity, impart impurity until they are no longer fit to be eaten by a dog. What's the footnote? Achas zo ba'achas zo ad lakelev. The carcass of an unslaughtered animal remains richly impure until it is no longer fit to be eaten by a dog. And according to the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbam Seif Tahar Hilchot Sha'ar Avatumot 113 imposed a difficulty to the opinion of Rabbi Yirmiyah, as this mass is fit for a dog. The Gemara concludes, indeed it's difficult. The Gemara discusses the matter itself. But Pada says, an item with severe rich impurity imparts impurity to substances until it is no longer fit to be eaten by a get toshav. But an item with light impurity imparts impurity to substances until it is no longer fit to be eaten by a dog. Rabbi Yochanan says that both this one and that one impart impurity until it is no longer fit to be eaten by a dog. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for the ruling of Bar Pada? As it is written, you shall not eat of any animal carcass. Dichsiv lo tochlu chol nevela v'chula. The base of halacha of impurity of an animal carcass appears in the verse, and if any animal of which you may eat die, he that touches his carcass shall be impure until the evening. Leviticus 11:39. And the details of this matter are derived from the verse in Deuteronomy cited here. Some suggest the dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Bar Pada is based on the different interpretation of the verse in Leviticus. Rabbi Yochanan holds that the verse in Deuteronomy corresponds to the first part of the verse in Leviticus, and if any animal of which you eat die, and therefore the halacha status of an animal carcass depends on whether it was fit to be eaten by a Gentile at the time of its death. Bar Pada maintains that the verse in Deuteronomy corresponds to the second part of the verse. He touches his carcass. Accordingly, the carcass must be fit for consumption at the time of physical contact in order with impurity impurity. You may give it to the ger who is within your gate, Deuteronomy 14:21. Bar Pada understands from this verse that an item which is fit for a ger toshav is called an animal carcass, and that which is not fit for a ger toshav is not called an animal carcass. Gemara asks, and with regard to the other sage, Rabbi Yochanan, how does he interpret the verse? He maintained that it serves to exclude a carcass that was decayed from the outset. The hisricha me ikara. Any food that becomes revolting and inedible to humans is not acceptable to its impurity. The meat of an unslaughtered animal carcass that was decayed from the outset is pure, as the verse states, you may give it to the ger who is within your gates, from which it is derived that the meat must be edible initially. Rambam Seif Tahar Hilchot Sha'ar Avatumot 114, Hilchot Ochlan 218. E.g., if the flesh started to decompose, the animal was still alive due to severe injury. But if the carcass was initially edible and later decayed, it continues to impart impurity provided it is fit for a dog. The Gemara asks, and with regard to the other sage, Bar Pada, how does he respond to this claim? The verse is not necessary to exclude such a case where the carcass was decayed from the outset. As opposed to the opinion of Bar Pada, Rabbi Yochanan holds that even if a substance is not forbidden for consumption, it could still impart rich impurity, as is the halacha with regard to the impurity of keeping animals and bodily discharge in Tosfot. As this is merely like dust and obviously does not impart impurity. We learned in our Mishnah that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, in the case of a large animal that expelled a mass of congealed blood, that mass must be buried, and the man exempt from having any future offspring come to the first. But Rabbi Chia teaches that mass of congealed blood does not impart racial impurity, neither through contact nor through carrying. And Rabbi Yochanan says it's due to halakha nullification of forbidden substances in a majority of permitted substances that the sages touched upon it, in order to exclude it from impurity through contact or carrying. The Gemara asks, why did Rabbi Yochanan say this halacha is due specifically to the nullification of a substance in a mixture by the majority of the mixture? No one derived the halacha from the fact that the mass is not fit for consumption at all, and it never was. The Gemara explains, this too was initially fit by virtue of its mother, i.e., if one had slaughtered the mother before the embryo was discharged, it would have been edible as part of the mother. We learned in a Mishnah elsewhere in Makshirin 6.3 that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, richly pure brine taken from an amaretz into which any amount of water fell is rendered impure. Rashi notes that the precise meaning of this mission depends on the opinions in the dispute cited on the previous Amud with regard to the status of nullified impurity. According to Abaye, it must be assumed that the water that fell into the brine was considered richly impure. According to Rav Dimi and Rabbi Yirmiyah, even pure water that fell in would render the brine impure. Rav Nachman said that Rabbi Ba'avu said that is to say that an Amaretz are suspected of mixing half a portion of water in the brine, which means that when the additional water falls in, the nullified impurity in the brine is revived by it, and renders the entire mixture impure. The Gemara asks, but why do I need to say they are suspected of mixing precisely half a portion of water? Even if they mix in less than half, the brine will also be rendered impure when contact with the added water, as that small amount combined with slightly less than half a portion of water constitutes half the mixture, and half a mixture is not nullified by the other half. The Gemara answers, say instead that an Amoritz is suspected of mixing water in until it constitutes slightly less than half the mixture. If you were saying instead the impurity of food belonging to an Amoritz applied by rabbinic law, and the impurity of liquids also applied by rabbinic law. Chumas Maskin de Rabbanon. There was a dispute among the sages concerning this matter in various places, primarily in Tractate Pesachim 14b. According to some, liquids render other substances susceptible to impurity but are not themselves impure by Torah law. Others hold that liquids are impure by Torah law, but they do not transmit their impurity to other items by Torah law. Locha is according to the latter opinion. Since the case of a mixture of fish brine and water involves water rendering other water impure, all agree that the impurity by rabbinic law. See the Chazon Ish. Accordingly, the impurity of the brine in this case is due to two separate rabbinic decrees. Where the majority is water, the sages decree that the brine is impure. But in a case where half the mixture is pure fish brine and half is water, the sages did not decree that the brine is impure. The Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer. In the case of one who purchases a nursing female from a Gentile, one who purchases a nursing female animal from a Gentile does not need to be concerned that it is nursing the offspring of another animal, in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. After the Rambam say for Bekhorot 4a Shulchan Aruch Yodei 316.2, he does not need to be concerned, i.e. take into account the possibility that perhaps it was nursing the offspring of another animal. With the exception of goats, only animals that have given birth or are close to give birth produce milk. Additionally, the majority of animals nurse only their own offspring, which the mother identifies by smell. On rare occasion, a newborn animal nurses from a different mother. Some commentaries infer from here that an animal that produces milk but has not yet begun nursing is not exempt from having its offspring counted firstborn on that basis alone, as there exists a minority of animals that produce milk before giving birth. Tosfos on 20b, citing Rabbeinu Tam. Although it is established that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is generally not concerned with the minority, here it is different because there is a pre-existing assumption that the animal is not yet giving birth, and this is its default status. Alternatively, the animals that produce milk before giving birth constitute a significant minority, which is why Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is concerned with the minority in this case. Rather, the buyer may assume that it had previously given birth. In the case of one who enters amid his flock, one who enters the pen and sees animals nursing may assume that each animal is nursing its offspring. Rambam Sefer Kabbalah Hilchot Bekhorot 5.4 Shulchan Aruch Yodei 16.5, and sees mother animals that gave birth for the first time that were nursing, and also sees mother animals that gave birth not for the first time that were also nursing. He does not need to be concerned that perhaps the offspring of this animal came to that animal to be nursed, or perhaps the offspring of that animal came to this animal to be nursed. Rav Nachman said the name of Rav. Allah is according to the opinion of the anonymous Tana in the Mishnah throughout the whole chapter, except where there's different opinion recorded in our Mishnah. Rav Sheish said, I say Rav was dozing or sleeping when he said this halacha. After all, to which Mishnah is referring? If we say it's referring to the first Mishnah in the chapter, 19b, then his ruling does not apply, as Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva disagree in that Mishnah. Rather, you will say it is referring to the ruling of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov in 21b. This is also problematic since it is already known that the halacha is in accordance with his opinion, and there is an established principle that the teacher of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who was the personality known, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, there are at least two Tanaim of this name, one who lived during the period of the destruction of the temple, and one who was among the disciples of Rabbi Akiva. Apparently the saying, the teaching of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov measures only a kav, It's clean and accurate, was stated in reference to the earlier stage. He saw the temple and transmitted main halachot with regard to the detail of its structure. Talking midah, which deals with the structure of the temple, is attributed to him. Measures only a kav, but is clean and accurate. So what's the footnote? The kav is simply a token example of a small measurement of flour or produce. Rashi explains that this statement is referring to the fact that although Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov is cited rarely, each of his statements is considered authoritative. Others suggest Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov would issue statements concisely and with precision, Rav Sheragon. In any case, this observation was issued in time of the Tanaim, it's the Yevamot 49b and Gittin 67a, and therefore the halacha is generally in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, see Eruvin 62b. Some say the halacha follows his opinion in 102 cases, which is numerical value of the word kav, Rosh 4.2, citing Bein Hanania. There was uncertainty among sages as to how to implement this principle, see Eruvin 62b and Encyclopedia Talmudic. And therefore the halacha is in accordance with his opinions. Rather, you will say that it is referring to the statement of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel in the Mishnah here. That is also difficult, as there is a Tana who disagrees in the Baraita cited on 24a. Rather, you will say that this is referring to the statement of Rabbi Yossi ben Ha-Meshulam in the next Mishnah 24b. But didn't Rab already say this one time? As Rav said, the halacha is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi ben Ha-Meshulam. Rather, you will say that it's referring to the matter of the hair of the blemish firstborn discussed in the Mishnah on 25b. But that case too is subject to a dispute, as the Kavi ben Mahalel and the rabbis disagree in that Mishnah. The Gemara answers, actually Rav's statement is referring to the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel here, and Rav teaches us this. But if the Mishnah is contradicted by a dissenting opinion cited in the Baraita, is not considered a dispute. Baraisa la paluktahi. Rashi and Tosfos explain there is a principle that any opinion cited in a Baraita that differs from an individual opinion in the Mishnah is not of halachic import. Others maintain that this was stated only with regard to this particular Baraita, the text of which Rav judges to have been corrupt in Caesar Fast Emes. The commentators further point out that unlike Rabbi Yochanan, Rav clearly does not accept the principle that halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. Where he quoted in the Mishnah Shai Lamora. And halacha therefore follows the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. The Gemara asks, but once Rav said this halacha in accordance with the opinion of an anonymous Tana in the Mishnah throughout the whole chapter, except where there is a difference of opinion, why don't you say the halacha is according to the opinion of Rabbi Yossi ben Ha-Meshulam? That's the end of the Omid. Thank you for listening. Wish you all the best and peace in Israel. Bye.